Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I am Braden, and this is the Second Legacy. Now, what we have for you today is a special treat. If you are seeing this either on Langley Outdoors Academy or you are seeing this on Military Arms Channel, you are catching the first ever public release of the new channel between Tim and I, Second Legacy. And what a way we are going to start out today. We have an interview with Alex Bosco. This is the inventor of the brace, the owner, the founder, the CEO of SP Tactical, with a appropriate focus on exactly what's going on with this pistol brace. There are so many things that are going on the internet right now, from you got 88 days before you have to destroy this thing. You've got different interpretations of what's going on. Is the foreign imports going to be destroyed? Or are they not? We are going to break it all down right now. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tim, my partner over here, and we will set this thing up for us.
All right. So, Alex, first of all, thank you for joining us, my friend. It's been an interesting road you and I have been on. I've known you since the very early days of your first original posts of your prototype on the discussion forums back in the day. And of course, I've been a user of the product and a fan of the product for many, many years. And how long now has the brace been on the U.S. market and approved by ATF for sales and use in the United States? How long has it been?
So that's an interesting question, because it was last Tuesday was 10 years to the day.
10 years, a full decade that this product has been approved and been for sale legally in the United States.
That is correct, man. 10 years. I can't even believe it myself. 10 years ago, I was just starting this thing off, and here we are 10 years later, and we're discussing ATF's third? I don't remember now.
I think we're definitely on four. Okay. Braden, do you know for sure?
Not perfectly, but I know it's up there. And that actually translates perfectly into kind of where the starting point of this entire thing. Obviously, we're talking about the ATF's new reversal on pistol braces and new definitions and revocations of previously approved items. I mean, this is by no means a small potato. This is like a massive situation. And the more time that goes on, the more this gets just deeper and deeper, this rabbit hole. I mean, there's a few things that we're going to touch on, but like, Tim, what would you want to start on? Would you want to start on the part of 88 days? Is it going to fail? Is it not going to fail? Do you want to start on the new regulations? Do you want to start on what they're actually doing with the 922R? Like, where do you kind of want to go first?
Well, let's start with where kind of all this got started. So, first of all, Alex had gone to ATF and gotten approval from them to bring this product to market. It was originally sold by SIG. It was known as the SIG brace, even though it was the SP Tactical brace. And they kind of made it a thing, and it grew in popularity. And again, over the decade that the brace has been on the market, it's been discussed multiple times, multiple different rulings, all of which said that, yes, that it's a legal device, and that, and at one point ATF said it wasn't even really within their purview to regulate accessories such as the brace, but now they're regulating it. And it goes back to what happened with the bump stocks. And when we started fighting the whole bump stock thing, we were trying to tell people it's not about the bump stocks, because we had so many people within our own community going, oh, let's not fall on our sword over bump stocks. Oh, they're stupid anyway. Nobody wants one. They're a waste of ammunition. And we kept trying to say, listen to these words. It has nothing to do with the bump stocks. It has to do with what ATF is doing and how they're doing it. They're making up laws out of whole cloth, and then they're assigning criminal penalties to these laws that didn't require an act of Congress, that they're doing with fiat, and then they're going to put people in prison for breaking this rule change. It's not even a law. And that's what we tried to warn people against. So now we have the whole bump stock thing that happened, and it segued right into the whole brace issue. And then we had an anti-gun administration come into power, the Biden administration. And once again, we had politicians telling a regulatory agency to how to do their jobs. And the Biden administration looked at the ATF and just said, make these go away. Don't care how you do it. Don't care what rules you have to break, what constitutional laws you have to trample. Just make these go away. And that's where we find ourselves today. ATF has been struggling for months to try to figure out a way to make these things go away in such a way that they won't lose in court, which would be my assumption. Alex, you can chime in at any point and put some clarification around some of this.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that we should clarify, and it's fairly new news because it was only a week or so before SHOT Show, was the Cargill case out of the Fifth Circuit. And in 30 seconds or less, what Cargill said, which split from the Ninth Circuit, essentially what they said was that if there is any ambiguity in the statute and there is a criminal statute that's behind it, then the rule of lenity applies. And what that means is if the rule of lenity applies, that the agency can't take legal action against that person. They need to be more lenient. That's where the name comes from. And essentially, the issue of what the ATF is going to say here is that they're going to say there's no ambiguity here. The only issue with the braces is that we never looked at it in this way, and now we're going to look at it in this way. And there's never really been any ambiguity. We were simply wrong. Now, the ATF is allowed to be wrong. And people think, oh, well, they can't make mistakes. They can make mistakes, and they need to correct it. The problem here is that they've gone back and forth so many times, and essentially it is ambiguous. If there was no ambiguity here, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And the fact that there is a criminal statute involved, in my opinion, means that the rule of lenity should apply. And if the rule of lenity applies, it's game over for ATF. Now, that's kind of legal speak, and the reality of it is, as we all know, or anybody who's been involved in any kind of judgment with a judge or anything like that, is that it boils down to people. And essentially, ATF is going to make their case. At some point, we're going to make our case, and it's going to be a judge who's going to decide on this matter based on whatever legal precedent each side is going to show. I don't know what the outcome is. I feel strongly that we're in a good position, but I do believe also that the way they've written this last iteration of what they've done was written much better, and that makes me a little bit nervous. They've done a better job. It wasn't I don't think it was ATF that wrote this last one. I think that was DOJ that came out with it, and I think that because there are some things in there, nuances that all of us on this call know about, like 922R, like imports, like all of that I don't think DOJ is so familiar with. They are probably familiar, but I don't know that they really understand the implications of what they said.
Right. And I just, something that I really wanted to hit on specifically, we'll dive into 922R for a second. Essentially high level, they're saying that because what was previously determined as a rifle was perfectly fine to import, but now because it's reclassified as a pistol, all of a sudden, if you take that pistol off, that is now something you can no longer own because it is no longer importable. And it really goes down to a list of 10 parts that the machines cannot be assembled by, or the firearms cannot be assembled by. The question in hand here really isn't, we can't import this because they changed the definition alone. It's really a bunch of these things are working together. I'm trying not to get too in the weeds, but essentially there's a list of 10 parts that you can't assemble a firearm from or go beyond that. And this redesignation essentially changes the game completely. Is that a correct assessment?
It is, but this is the issue, and this is the biggest problem. Look, you and I can talk about it. Tim and I have talked about it ad nauseum, and if you talk to a lot of people that are in our industry, we know about this stuff. The problem with this issue that we're having, at least from the perspective of a gun owner and from the perspective of the owner of the company, is how do we get this information out to the public to understand how impactful, how detrimental it is to millions of gun owners? And here we are, three guys who've been in this industry for years, who know all about this stuff. And even we're having issues explaining what it means to be able, you can import the pistol, okay, not the rifle, because the rifles are not considered for sporting purposes, which talks about even another rule.
Right.
So it's so it's not for sporting purposes, you can import the pistol. So now what 922R is saying is that because we're saying that it was a rifle from birth, is what they're saying, there is no way to remedy that scenario other than to destroy the rifle, even if we said it was a pistol. So it's complicated. It's even complicated. I feel bad even for some of the people that are listening, because this is stuff that I talk about all the time, but it's tough, man. It's deep.
Let's walk this back a bit, because because perhaps somebody watching the show right now doesn't fully understand what we're talking about. So this started off with an issue regarding braces. What is a brace? A stabilizing brace is a device that was meant to stabilize a heavy handgun like an AR-15 pistol, right? And so that's where this discussion started, was with whether or not a brace is a stock or not in the eyes of the ATF. And ATF has held for a decade that it's not a stock. It didn't change the classification of the pistol by putting one on there. That's what they've held for 10 years. Now they're changing their mind. But in changing their mind, they're not just attacking the brace. Now they're going after all of the firearms the braces could have been attached to. They're going so far as to say, oh yeah, by the way, all those handguns we approved for import for the last 50 years, yeah, we mistakenly called those pistols. They're really rifles. And so now those are contraband and illegal, and there's nothing you can do to make those legal. So it's going beyond just the brace issue now. Now they're applying this to the importation of firearms and how they've classified those firearms previously for importation purposes. So this keeps growing in scope to the point where, as this rule stands, when it goes live, if they enforce it the way it's written, there are going to be hundreds of thousands of firearms that are literally illegal, and the only legal way to be in compliance with the law in the ATF's view would be to surrender, destroy your property. There's no registering them or anything. Right. Certain classes, based upon their reinterpretation of their reinterpretation of their reinterpretation, is now that, nope, you know what, we screwed up, and that SP-89 you bought back in 1987, sorry guys, that's actually a rifle, and yeah, you can't have that.
The issue though, Tim, I think, is that if we're going to do that, and we can make this whole thing really short. We're not going to do that because there's a lot to talk about and unpack. But the reality of it is the fundamental issue for anybody, including people who don't agree with our philosophy, and I'm talking about Democrats, but we can even talk about libertarians, anarchists, whoever, whatever your government philosophy is. The fundamental question is, should a bureaucratic agency be able to take an act of Congress that's gone through the legislative process and take a definition that was established during that process and change it? That's the fundamental question. And the answer should be no, especially if there are criminal implications. And that is that is what they've done. They've taken the definition of rifle under the NFA, and they've added braces to that definition. By doing so, a brace is a stock, and therefore anything with a brace on it is changing it into an SPR. That is the entire discussion in, again, 30 seconds or less. Should they be able to do that? And I think
Alex, I'm so glad you said that, because that was what I was waiting for an opening to start to go into, right? So we've seen similar things across the board. And to your point, if you're trying to connect with someone who is on the maybe not gun side, maybe they're on the free speech side, maybe they're on the EPA side, whatever the choice of the day is, right? You've got a new Supreme Court case that came out, West Virginia versus EPA, where the CDC, or not the CDC, I'm sorry, the EPA was trying to basically reclassify carbon dioxide as a toxin, which would increase taxes, which would put business out. They would basically give the EPA more power. The Supreme Court said you cannot do that. Executive bureaucracies cannot overstep Congress. So that goes you directly to the next part there, that Chevron deference, which is the interpretation of existing law, which is also what Jim Jordan has sent letters to the ATF saying, you're usurping our power. You're out of bounds. I mean, we're seeing this across the board, not just in the pistol braces, not just in the EPA. You're seeing it in ghost gun cases, tactical machining in Texas. Almost the exact same conversation came out in that litigation. I think this is actually going towards something bigger than pistol braces, something bigger than ghost guns. This is reclassification and reinterpretation through Chevron deference of an executive bureaucracy, which is taking the power from Congress, the people who are supposed to be making the laws, not the executive branch. And I think that is a crucial point to hit on.
Yeah, I just don't know that we're going to get, it's funny, we can talk about a million other things, but like a lot of people are saying, my body, my choice. And not to deviate here too much, but like everybody's always said, my body, my choice. And then you bring up the fact, well, what about vaccinations? Well, then, my body, my choice, but not so much. So you try to have conversations with people, and I always try to be intellectually honest with my stance, where I stand. And I think with this, in order to get people to understand you better, and we need, we're bicameral, we have two parties. We need the other side to understand how dangerous a step this is. It's not just about winning and getting rid of guns. It's, do you want an agency to have that power? And then with that said, we should probably go back to, well, what does this mean now for everybody? Because now this has happened, okay? They're going to be publishing this thing. And Tim, you and I were talking about this earlier. I think I was mentioning to you that it's like it's in the queue, but I'm not sure when it's going to be published. But I would suspect within the next within the next week, I would suspect something being published. But now, what do we do? 922R, 88 days, 120 days to register. Like,
and then firearms you can't even register because they've classified them as unregisterable. The only thing that they'll accept is surrender or destruction. So, I mean, that's still a factor in this, right, Alex?
Yeah, it's a factor, and look, we call them Gucci guns, so it's like, some of these guns are not, we're not talking about an Anderson lower here, and God bless Anderson, because they make weapons or system firearms or low receivers that are available to everybody, but we're talking about, B&T guns. We're talking about guns that are upwards of $3,000.
But we're also talking about your Scorpion Evos and your Streebogs. Because I've had a lot of people going, what about my Scorpion? What about my Streebog? Was it made overseas? Yeah. Was it imported as a pistol? Yeah. Did they make a brace for it? Yeah. Okay. Surrender or destroy it per ATF regulation.
I know what they're gonna say, and they're gonna say that we're gonna be able to use what's the term that we were talking about?
Discretion.
Discretion.
Discretion is the big term. We're gonna be able to use our discretion. They're going to say that, and I think that they're going to try and make a good argument to any judge to say that they can use their discretionary powers to say we're not going to go after that. Obviously, the response from everybody else is, yeah, you can use discretion until you don't.
Right. The way it's written is, I mean, what judge would look at that and go, well, it's written this way, but you're saying ATF, you're going to use your discretion. Okay, we'll just go with that. We're going to trust you there. We're not going to take you at face value for what you've actually written into the regulation. We're just going to say, yeah, you can write whatever you want in the regulation. It's really irrelevant. It's all about your discretion, and we're going to trust that.
Well, it's worse than that, Tim, because they put in there that they would use discretion for other things. So they've brought up discretion in when they were going. I think they were referred, again, it's 293 pages. I've read it 3 or 4 times now, but I know that in the first 20 or so pages, they talk about using their discretion about when to begin applying, the enforcement. And I think they were saying something like 60 days. There was a little bit of confusion and talk behind that, but they've mentioned that term discretion. Well, in the impact study that they did, which is where they're talking about this 922R stuff, they never mentioned discretion. So they made a distinction about using it, and look, I'm not an attorney, but in my opinion, they've made the point of using discretion in one place, but not in another. And I think that's where it starts whittling down to it being difficult to explain that to a judge. That's why I feel like we're in a strong position. But again, we're fighting the federal government here, guys. This is not an easy thing.
Yeah. So here's the other thing. So I've noticed that they're setting up a completely separate website. So, the ATF director has said that, don't worry, you're going to get a free tax stamp out of this. Just register yourself, send us some pictures of your guns, do some fingerprints, do everything that's required of, filing a Form 1 in essence. Go to this completely separate website and register yourself and your firearm. And then we come up with this thing that was discovered by GOA's lawyers with the 88-day thing. Right? Which you said may or may not be enforced. We don't know. We don't know what they're going to do. But by the way it's written, after 88 days, if you get delayed 88 days, you get an automatic denial. The ATF director, if I'm not mistaken, said after 88 days, if you get a denial, after you've submitted yourself and your firearm to this new system, that will trigger compliance, enforced in compliance. What does that mean? Presumably that means they're going to come take your gun away. That may mean they're going to come search your entire house. We don't know what that means other than if you get denied because you go past 88 days on a delay, then they're going to enforce the rule on you. And so, you'll see people out there posting videos. It's a trap. Don't register your guns, all this other stuff. And that's where this is stemming from. Right. And so there's this fear, this ambiguity that gun owners are being set up here to self-incriminate themselves using a completely different system. Why aren't we using the existing e-file system? Why have they set up this separate system? What are they doing? This is creating distrust in the community, and rightfully so, because we have no idea what they're going to do. They're telling us that certain guns we're going to have to destroy or turn in. Other guns we're going to have to register ourselves and our firearms, but who knows, if we get delayed too long, we might actually get our guns taken away, our door kicked in. We don't know what's going to happen here.
Well, right. And that's, oh, I'm so sorry, Alex. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
So I think that's an important distinction to really throw in there, Tim, is we don't actually know if that 88 days thing is going to be a real issue or if it's something that goes on to a different form. Well, like there's so much ambiguity, to your point, that it does lead to distrust. So I mean, one of the things that I found was interesting in that ruling, they didn't talk a lot about a simple solution of putting a pistol buffer tube on there. It's like that's a, you can file this and you can get an NFA item and now you have an SBR and you're all squeaky clean and it's free, or you could destroy it. And that's your only options. And I'm reading this thing and I'm going, what about a pistol buffer tube?
Well, so the one thing that I was going to say that adds to what you're saying is that essentially what the ATF has always wanted, and this goes back to and I talked with you, Tim, I think 2 years ago when we did the show, your show, but I've been trying to sit down with ATF for years, okay? Ever since they started having issues with, well, do we, I've been asking, do you have problems with this? And they always said, no, there's no issues. We had the letter from Colorado from that officer that said that they can't tell you how to use the firearm. And then it started getting a little bit weird where they were like, well, we need to have standards here about what is and isn't. And I could get behind that. I can get behind standards. You want to tell me that, it's just like, what's the difference between a pistol and a rifle? The length of pull or the length of the barrel and all that stuff. But they don't want that. What they want is they want to be able to have the most amount of power over you. And if they give you numbers like you're just talking about the buffer tube, to give me the surface area. Is the surface area an issue? Yes, it's an issue. Okay. What is it? 1.5 square inches, 2 square inches, or 0.5 square? Tell me what surface area you're talking about. Is it length of pull? They talk about length of pull in there. Tell me what the length of pull is. Is it the weight of the firearm? Tell me what it is.
Is it a strap?
And the problem is, right? Is it the strap? No strap. What is it? They don't want to be that. They want to be able to have the most amount of power, authority to be able to say what is and isn't a brace. And in this case, you can't do that because we're talking about a 10-year felony offense. We're talking about millions of Americans, and we're talking about a scenario where the ATF has been ambiguous and has flip-flopped over the years. I mean, think about all the guys that you guys know, okay? Think about living out in the middle of the woods of nowhere. Thinking about living in Montana. You think everybody's going to know about this thing?
I'd say about 90% of the people that bought their firearms legally at a gun store have no idea this is coming. They don't live online. And that's one of the questions I wanted to pose to you because you've been in discussions with ATF. What's ATF's budget for notifying the public? How much money are they going to spend on television ads and newspaper and social media to notify people of this rule change that could put them in prison for 10 years? Precisely.
Zero.
They're making zero effort to notify people. And literally, I would say the vast majority of gun owners that own pistols with braces, who bought them at a gun store, your assumption is that you filled out your 4473 form, you did your background check, you went home with a legal item, you're legal. You have no reason to believe that one day somebody's going to knock on your door because you're shooting in your backyard and your neighbor reported you, that you're going to get your door kicked in and you're going to get arrested and charged with 10-year prison sentence for owning an illegal SBR that wasn't an SBR when you purchased it. And how is this falling on deaf ears within the court system, within the legal system? How is anybody looking at this seriously going, you're making no effort here, ATF, to do right by any of this? If anything, it's like all underhanded and done in secrecy so that you can basically entrap people. That's what it looks like on the surface, right?
You're talking about the term that everybody's been using, and I think, pre-call we were talking about it a little bit, but it's retroactivity. How is it that you can establish a regulation and retroactively apply it? We've always talked about grandfathering, and there has been historically, we were talking, I think one of them was the street sweepers. There was a grandfathering to those. You had to register them, but it was grandfathered. There should be I would think that there should be some kind of grandfathering involved here. The issue is, and we've spoken about this a few times before, and a lot of people have mentioned this, and I don't even like bringing it up, but I'll bring it up anyway, is if you grandfather it creates a really good argument for suggesting that SBRs themselves should not be part of the NFA. Because you're essentially saying, what the ATF is trying to say is that having these types of firearms is a public safety issue. So if they were to grandfather and say that, you can keep them and don't worry about it. Essentially what they're saying is short-barreled rifles are no problem. So they're in a pretty pickle. Like, what direction do they want to go in? We've seen the direction they want to go in, but a judge is not going to play that game. I don't think he is. I think a judge is going to be like, well, hold on a second here. So,
see, and that's the important part, Alex. I think that you're hitting on, like, it's perfectly acceptable to be upset about this. I get it 100%. It's perfectly acceptable to be concerned about the overreach of a federal government across the board in many different spectrums. But now to the point of where we move forward, in my personal opinion, I think the ATF has made it so ambiguous that they're going to find trouble. And one of the things that you mentioned in the description of, hey, what's the surface area of a brace? Well, we know what it is, but we're not telling you. How is that going to stand up in court? Like, what is the length of a pull? Is it 8 inches? Is it 12 inches? Like, there's so much ambiguity that they're not going to unleash that to the public. So they're just going to hold it to you so they can kind of keep it close to the vest. I don't see that holding water in court. The other thing that I don't see holding water in court is the thousands of dollars that will now be confiscated, essentially, or destroyed, basically wasted, with no recourse whatsoever from the federal government when it was perfectly legal. They never broke the law when they did this. Like Tim was saying, you have this for 20 years, all of a sudden you're a felon. Well, what? That doesn't make any sense. How can the government not come in here? I mean, you've got so many ways that I feel that this is vulnerable, that I think there's a very strong conversation to be had that will have a very large impact. I guess the best way I'm trying to say it.
And what it's going to boil down to is what court hears the case. Because as we already know from the bump stocks, anybody that has any ounce of objectivity in their system can look at the argument made about the bump stock, look at the statute, which is crystal clear, apply how a bump stock functions, even in slow motion, which was done in court. And the only way somebody that's impartial can look at that, the only conclusion they can come to is a bump stock does not meet the statutory definition of a machine gun. It simply doesn't. The trigger's being pulled every single time. And that's the statutory definition, right? But yet we have a split decision in the circuit courts. We have one court that says, nope, it's a machine gun. And now we have another circuit court saying, nope, it's not a machine gun. And it's all based on activism and judges that don't apply the law. They're applying their activism. And so now we have to figure out, when we fight this thing, which circuit we're going to try to get it into to fight it, to get the ruling that is just. But then we still have to worry about the Supreme Court. And I'm sorry, guys, I don't have any faith in the Supreme Court. They just, once again, just pulled another little stunt with what's going on in New York. I just don't trust the court systems. I don't truly believe that they're going to be objective in this and apply the law and apply statutes, because we're dealing with firearms, and firearms are such a hot button issue that it seems to change the game. If this was any other subject, abortion or any other hot button up subject, we would have a completely different outcome. But because we're dealing with firearms, we're gonna get shafted in this.
I'm going to take a different take, Tim. I don't agree with what I agree with you that I don't agree that I think the Supreme Court should have taken it, but it fits what they want the lower courts to hash it out. Okay. And, you got Gorsuch, you got Kavanaugh, you have Amy Coney Barrett. Historically, even when they were judges before they were Supreme Court judges, they thought the same way. And what they've said, even in their interviews, was the Supreme Court shouldn't be making laws, okay? The lower courts need to hash things out. And then if there's a split, like there is now with the Ninth Circuit and the Fifth Circuit for the bump stock case, then it is ripe to go to the Supreme Court. And I think if some of the judges are intellectually honest, and I think some of them are definitely activists, like you say, but I think that they would agree that a bureaucratic agency shouldn't be making any kind of laws if there are criminal implications, just as they said with West Virginia versus EPA. So I get it in a way. I get the whole thing about New York. I'm upset about it. I wish the Supreme Court would take it, because I think what they're doing is disgusting and despicable, what the state is doing. But they really want to see that play out. And I like that, because it being intellectually honest, I don't want the Supreme Court really jumping into the state's issue. Okay, the state has to be really, really out of whack, and they're getting to that point. I think we can all agree that the state of New York what they're doing after the last ruling, and now they're making it impossible to go anywhere. They're essentially usurping what the last court said. I get that it's wrong and our system is wrong, but having the Supreme Court jump in prematurely, I think would be wrong too. Just my opinion.
Now, Alex,
yeah. Go ahead.
So you actually, that's exactly where I was going to go. So in that situation with the SCOTUS and the New York Circuit Court, there were some very important things because the people who issued it, Alito and Thomas, they both said in a joint statement, don't give up, don't stop pursuing these things, Second Amendment advocates, because you are going in the right, I mean, they didn't say you're going in the right direction, but they essentially said don't give up. And then right on the backside of that, they told the Second Circuit Court, you better do this with haste and you better explain yourself promptly. And that doesn't happen a lot. Now, I get it, Tim. I totally see where you're coming from. The Supreme Court could easily just be like, I just decided this. Why are you not enforcing it? I think it was kind of like a shot across the bow, like, hint, hint, wink, wink. I'll talk to you if you don't. You know what I'm saying?
But take this into consideration. The bump stock ruling would stand as them being deemed to be machine guns until the Fifth Circuit stepped in and gave a conflicting ruling. Correct. Right? So had the Fifth Circuit not gotten involved in this argument, the Supreme Court refused to hear our case. They said, nope, we're going to let the lower court decision stand, which said it's a machine gun, which clearly it's not. The Supreme Court was going to let it stand. They weren't going to hear the case. Now the Fifth Circuit has stepped in and said, actually, it's not a machine gun. And now we do have that conflict. Now the Supreme Court should step in. What I'm saying is the Supreme Court should have looked at that and said, this doesn't meet the statutory definition of a machine gun if they would have reviewed the case. So my problem is we're not guaranteed the Supreme Court's going to give us the ruling we want. We have to hope that we get that conflict in the lower courts. We may not get it. The lower courts may just say, no, braces are illegal, and there will be no conflicting opinion, and that's now the law.
But so that's my concern. Way. I know, and you're right, Tim. Again, it's not me. I'm not against what you're saying. You're busting down an open door, I think, with both of us. What I'm saying is that I think that the only way to do it is even what GOA is doing. I mean, you have to go there and fight it in a circuit that's going to be friendly to create that split. And that split is what causes it to go to the Supreme Court. If there's a circuit that they all agree on it, you're right. It's never going to get to the Supreme Court. And that's why, and I'm going to call them as many as I can, GOA, Second Amendment Foundation, NRA, FPC, FRAC, all of those people are super important. And that's why it's super important for anybody in the industry to give money. I don't care who you're going to give money to. I think GOA is great. I think FRAC is great. I think NRA, whoever it is, choose one of those people, because those grassroots foundations are the ones that are going to create the conflict needed to get to the Supreme Court. And remember, we got Biden. I mean, I don't think he's going to last another 2 years, but we've got Biden for another 2 years. And in that period of time, some other, Supreme Court justice could be out of here. And if we don't win the next election, I mean, if things are going to be decided by a Supreme Court that is not friendly to the Second Amendment, this whole conversation we're having, it's moot. It's gone. So
absolutely.
Anyway.
Well, Alex, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show and have this conversation with us. I think it's really important that everybody watching this, first of all, share this video and get the information out there. It's important what Alex has to say. He is the closest to this by far, given the fact that he is the inventor of the brace, and he has been fighting this every step of the way from a legal standpoint. And it's really important that people get up in arms, get politically active, and contact your representatives and do everything you possibly can. As Alex was saying, join a gun rights group. I don't care which one. I'm part of GOA. I'm a strong GOA advocate. But if you want to join some other groups, Second Amendment Foundation, whatever, pick one and get in the fight, because if you don't, we will lose our rights. And so, again, I want to thank you, Alex, for coming on the show. Braden, thank you so much, man, for a great intro and opening this whole thing up, because it is an important conversation to have. If you guys would like to learn more, please go by the GOA website. You can sign up for free email notifications. You don't have to become a member, but if you sign up for those email notifications, they'll let you know when things like this are taking place, so you can become politically active. All right, guys, we really appreciate the support. Please be sure to subscribe to The Second Legacy. I will put a link in my video. I know Braden will put a link in his video as well, as we're going to post this to our respective channels. So please subscribe over there, and we will talk to you guys soon.